This is the Zeitgeist, the movie, as you can see up here. Like I said before many times in other videos, you can go to tubi.com, Tubi. You don't have to sign in or do anything. You just start watching movies.
In turn, and as anticipated, the sinking of the Lusitania caused a wave of anger among the American population, and America entered the war a short time after. Major General Smedley D. Butler summarizes the monetary reality of World War I.
Looking back, Woodrow Wilson, he's the guy who did the bank, right, the Federal Reserve Bank, was re-elected president in 1916 on a platform that he had kept us out of the war. Yeah, he said the whole time while he's making his Federal Reserve Bank, he's like, no, I'm not going to use it for war. I know that's what you think, but no, we're not going to do that. I know that's the way in every society, and since the beginning of time, everyone that makes a central bank. That's what they do. They just use it so they can print up money to make these wars and make money on the debt that the society gets for printing up all this money. But we're not going to do it, okay? And yet, 5 months later, he asked Congress to declare war on Germany. The 4 million children, right, young men, who basically little kids, right, 18 years old, 20 years old, little children, 4 million of them, put on uniforms and marched or sailed away, were not asked whether they wanted to go forth to suffer and die. Then what caused our government to change its mind so suddenly? Oh, money. An Allied commission came over shortly before the war declaration and called on the president. They said the president summoned a group of advisors. The head of commission spoke, stripped of its diplomatic language. This is what he told the president and his group. There's no kidding ourselves any longer. The cause of the Allies is lost. We now owe you, meaning the American bankers, the American munitions makers, etc., $5 or $6 billion. And keep in mind, this is a lot of money back then, man. If we lose, without the United States, we must lose. We're going to definitely lose if we lose, if we don't get help from the United States. But also, we, England, France, and Italy, cannot pay back this money, and Germany won't. It has been estimated by statisticians and economists and researchers that the war yielded $16 trillion in profits. That is how 21,000 billionaires and millionaires got that way. This $16 trillion profit is not to be sneezed at. It is quite a tidy sum, and it went to a very few, and the guy who said this was Major General Smedley D. Butler. War is a racket, 1935. Now I want you to notice, World War I, they made the Federal Reserve Bank. Here comes World War I, right? World War II, right after that, right, they made the World Bank and the IMF. So they changed, and they made the money more global, you know what I mean? So they changed the monetary big time there and with World War I. That's what, see, these world wars, they, federal banks and world wars, they go hand in hand, or any kind of war, really. If you have a Federal Reserve Bank, they go hand in hand.
World War II. On December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked the American fleet at Pearl Harbor, triggering U.S. entry into that war. President Franklin D. Roosevelt declared the attack was a day that will live in infamy. A day of infamy indeed, but not because of the alleged surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. After 60 years of surfacing information, it is now clear that not only was the attack known well in advance, it was outright wanted and provoked. In a journal entry by Roosevelt's Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, dated November 25, 1941, he documented a conversation he had with Roosevelt. The question was how we should maneuver them into firing the first shot. And in congressional testimony later, he added, It was desirable to make sure the Japanese be the ones to do this so that there should remain no doubt as to who were the aggressors. In the months leading up to the attack on Pearl...
See, these aren't like... You can see this. That was from a under oath in front of Congress. These aren't like, conspiracy stories that he's talking about. These are all well documented. You know what I mean? Everything is documented.
Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt had done almost everything in his power to anger the Japanese, showing a posture of aggression. He halted all of Japan's imports of American petroleum. He froze all Japanese assets in the United States. He made public loans to nationalist China and supplied military aid to the British, both enemies of Japan in the war, which, by the way, was in complete violation of international war rules. And with numerous Japanese codes broken in advance, revealing the plan to attack, on December 7, 1941, Japan was allowed to attack Pearl Harbor, killing 2,400 soldiers.
This is how evil these people are, man. And what's funny is they tell us. It might be like 10 years later, 20. They gotta wait till some people die most times. You know what I mean? And then when everyone that was guilty dies, they release it and tell you. But like, how many times can they do it every decade? There's more stuff that's released out that happened, back in the past, what they did, but like nobody listens to it. Like they admit it.
Before Pearl Harbor, 83% of the American public wanted nothing to do with the war. After Pearl Harbor, 1 million men volunteered. It is important to note, Nazi Germany's war effort was largely supported by two organizations, one of which was called IG Farben. IG Farben produced 84% of Germany's explosives. One of the unspoken partners of IG Farben was J.D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company in America. In fact, the German Air Force could not operate without a special additive patented by Rockefeller's Standard Oil.
Only Rockefeller, and he's a royal, by the way, he's related to Bush. They're related. They share the same 7 grandfathers, or 5 grandfathers, say, who are the first kings of everything. First kings of England, France, Germany, all of it. Yeah. They're cousins, but they have direct bloodlines to these kings. But anyways, he only had the patents. He only had the manufacturing, plants, the factories making it. He was the only one who had the actual additive. No one else had it. So if he didn't sell this additive to Hitler, Hitler would have 0 jets. They would just have biplanes. You know what I mean? And all the other countries would, the Allies would have jets. How long there would have been no World War III. There could not have been a World War II, because you can't be a country that has biplanes and the other country has jets. And the jet guy's gonna win. Go on.
The drastic bombing of...
So if you wanted to go back in time and stop Hitler from, rising in, the Nazi Germany, you don't shoot Hitler. You shoot Prescott Bush in the head, and you shoot J.D. Rockefeller in the head. Those are the 2 people you shoot in the head, and there wouldn't have been. And Prescott Bush is the grandfather and father of the 2 presidents, George Bush's.
Of London by Nazi Germany, for example, was made possible by a $20 million sale of fuel to IG Farben by the Rockefellers' Standard Oil Companies. In the men to attack, on December 84% of Germany's explosives, one of the unspoken 400 soldiers. Before Pearl Harbor, 83% of the American public wanted nothing to do with the war. After Pearl Harbor, 1 million men volunteered. It is important to note, Nazi Germany's war effort was largely supported by 2 organizations, one of which was called IG Farben. IG Farben produced 84% of Germany's explosives. One of the unspoken partners of IG Farben was J.D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company in America. In fact, the German Air Force could not operate without a special additive patented by Rockefeller's Standard Oil. The drastic bombing of London by Nazi Germany, for example, was made possible by a $20 million sale of fuel to IG Farben by the Rockefellers' Standard Oil Company. This is just one small point on the topic of how American business funded both sides of World War II. One other treasonous organization worth mentioning is the Union Banking Corporation of New York City. Not only did they finance numerous aspects of Hitler's rise to power, along with actual materials during the war, it was also a Nazi money laundering bank, which was eventually exposed for having millions of dollars of Nazi money in its vaults.
See, that's what I'm talking about. It's all documented. It's in papers, books, congressional hearing transcripts. There's all kinds. It's not there. It's not conspiracy. Okay, they actually took his bank, and it was in the papers.
The Union Banking Corporation of New York was eventually seized for violations of the Trading with the Enemy Act. Guess who the director and vice president of the Union Bank was? Prescott Bush, the father and grandfather of former U.S. Presidents George W. Bush and George H.W. Bush. Vietnam. The United States' official escalation and entry into the Vietnam War came after an alleged incident involving 2 U.S. destroyers being attacked by North Vietnamese PT boats in the Gulf of Tonkin. This is known as the Gulf of Tonkin Incident. This situation was the catalytic pretext for massive troop deployment and full-fledged warfare. One problem, however, the attack on the U.S. destroyers by Vietnamese PT boats never happened. Former Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara stated years later that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a mistake, while classified documents released years later show that it was a farce, manipulated.
See, they FOIA requested the, Freedom of Information Act. That's basically why we know this happens over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, because they have papers, classified government papers, saying that they're doing that, what they're doing. They're admitting it.
Manipulated for the purposes of war. And once in the war, it was business as usual. In October 1966, President Lyndon Johnson lifted trade restrictions on the Soviet bloc, knowing full well that the Soviets were providing upwards of 80% of North Vietnam's war supplies. Consequently, the Rockefeller interests financed factories in the Soviet Union, which the Soviets used to manufacture military equipment and send to North Vietnam. However, the funding of both sides in this conflict was only one side of the coin. In 1985, Vietnam's rules of engagement were declassified. This detailed what American troops were and were not allowed to do in the war. It included such absurdities as North Vietnamese anti-aircraft missile systems could not be bombed until they were known to be operational. No enemy could be pursued once they crossed the border of Laos or Cambodia. And most revealing of all, the most critical strategic targets were not allowed to be attacked unless initiated via high military officials. Apart from these illogical limitations, North Vietnam was informed of these restrictions and therefore could base entire strategies around the limitations of the American forces.
Does this remind you of the Jew thing, the Israel war thing? They tell them, hey, if you put all your stuff by hospitals, we won't bomb you. And all over, plastered all over the news. They put all their crap by hospitals. They're like, durr.
This is why the war went on for so long. And the bottom line is this: the Vietnam War was never meant to be won, just sustained. This war for profit and resources.
And no one ever thought, hey man, it's a third world country. How has it taken 17 years? And we have killed 3 million people, and they've only killed it 58,000. They literally, because that's nothing compared to 3 million, man. So that they've literally killed no one. All we're doing is killing 3 million children, basically. Because that's what they are, 18-year-olds, little 16, 20-year-old Vietnamese kids in the army. We killed 3 million children, right? And over 17 years of period, and nobody said, hey, how could we kill 3 million people, children? How could we kill 3 million children and not blow up any of their stuff? Like their munitions, places and their tank places where they store their, they're like, how come we didn't win this war yet? They're a third world country. No one said that, huh?
This has resulted in 58,000 American deaths and 3 million dead Vietnamese. So, where are we now? September 11th was the jumpstart for a hegemonic agenda, enabling the possibility of constant global warfare. It was a staged war pretext, no different than the sinking of the Lusitania, the provoking of Pearl Harbor, and the Gulf of Tonkin lie. In fact, if 9/11 wasn't a planned war pretext, it would be an exception to the rule.